The arena roared like thunder, a sea of alien voices echoing across the red sky. The Valoran Empire was celebrating its greatest festival, a day of strength and honor, when warriors from across the stars proved their might before the royal family. In the center of the grand arena stood the champion of the Empire, a giant alien named Korthal, known for crushing opponents with one swing of his glowing blade. Across from him stood a single man, a human named Ethan Ward. He looked small next to the towering alien, his simple metal sword dull beside the champion's crystal weapon. The crowd laughed at him, some even threw stones. To them, humans were weak creatures, slow, fragile, and soft. Princess Zera Valora, the Emperor's proud daughter, sat high above the arena, her eyes filled with contempt. She had chosen Korthal as her personal protector, and she wanted this duel to show the galaxy that no alien or human could ever defeat a Valoran champion. "End it quickly," she said coldly, waving her hand. The gong sounded and Korthal roared, rushing forward. His blade cut through the air with a bright blue flash. Ethan didn't move at first. He simply watched, calm and still. The crowd laughed harder. "He's frozen with fear," someone shouted. But when the champion's blade came down, Ethan stepped aside like a whisper, his movement smooth, controlled, almost too fast to see. Korthal turned, swinging again, but Ethan wasn't there. He was behind him. One quick motion, one flash of steel, and then silence. The crowd didn't understand what happened until Korthal dropped to his knees. His chest opened with a clean, glowing line. A second later, the champion split in half, falling lifeless to the sand. Gasps filled the air. The laughter stopped. No one moved. Even the Emperor rose from his throne in shock. A human, one small, quiet human, had just slain the Empire's strongest warrior in less than 10 seconds. Ethan wiped his blade, his expression unreadable. He looked up at the royal balcony and said softly, "The duel is over." His voice carried through the silence like thunder. Princess Zera gripped her chair tightly, her heart pounding. Rage burned in her eyes. Her champion, her pride, was gone, and now the ancient law of her people came crashing down upon her, the law of victory. It stated that any royal challenger who lost in ritual combat would be bound to the victor, mind, body, and soul. The Emperor's face hardened. "The human has won by our law," he said, his deep voice echoing through the arena. "By the right of conquest, the princess and her house belong to the victor." The crowd erupted into shouts and chaos. Some protested, others cheered. Soldiers rushed forward, surrounding Ethan, ready to strike him down for daring to win. But the Emperor raised his hand. "The law is ancient," he said. "Even I cannot break it." Zera stood frozen. Her blood boiled, her pride screamed, but the truth was clear. The human had won, and she was now his by right. Her maids, Tali and Vera, stood behind her in shock, whispering in fear. "It can't be," one said. "No human could do this." Ethan looked up at Zera again. For a moment their eyes met. There was no victory in his gaze, only sadness. He did not look like a conqueror. He looked like a man who wished the fight had never happened. As guards approached him, Ethan dropped his sword and raised his hands peacefully. "I didn't come here to take anyone's freedom," he said calmly. "I only came to prove that humans are not weak," but no one listened. The crowd demanded punishment. The nobles screamed that the Empire's honor was broken. The Emperor spoke once more, sealing the fate of all. "Take them," he ordered. "Prepare the ceremony. The law must be fulfilled." Zera's heart sank. The idea of belonging to a human filled her with fury and shame. Yet beneath her anger a strange feeling stirred, a memory of the way he fought, clean and calm, without hate or cruelty. She remembered how he didn't strike to hurt, only to end the fight swiftly. As guards led her away, she glanced back. Ethan stood alone in the arena, surrounded by armed soldiers but not resisting. The crowd shouted insults, yet he didn't move or speak. The blood on his sword wasn't his, but somehow, he looked as if he carried a heavier wound inside him. That night, as the twin moons rose above the Empire's capital, the entire galaxy whispered about one event. The day a human split the Valoran champion in half and claimed the Emperor's daughter by law. And while Zera lay awake, trapped between fury and confusion, one thought echoed in her mind over and over. What kind of man wins a kingdom? And looks like he regrets it? It was only the beginning of a story that would shake the stars. The golden walls of the palace glowed under the morning sun. But for Princess Jera Valora, everything felt cold. Her wrists were bound with soft silver cords, symbols of surrender, not cruelty. Yet to her they burned like fire. Her maids, Tali and Vera, followed quietly behind as royal guards escorted them down the long marble hallway. The echoes of their footsteps sounded like a slow march of shame. Jera had been raised to see humans as fragile, lesser beings from a distant world. But last night, in front of thousands, one human shattered that belief like glass. She could still see it. The flash of the human sword, the calm in his eyes, the way her champion's mighty body fell in silence. Every memory made her chest tighten with anger and confusion. The guard stopped before a tall metal door. "Enter," the commander said, voice cold and formal. The doors opened, revealing Ethan Ward, sitting quietly at a long stone table. His wounds were wrapped in white cloth, his face pale but calm. There were no chains on him, no crown, no sign of pride. He looked more like a soldier who wanted rest than a victor. Jera lifted her chin, hiding her pain behind pride. "So this is what victory looks like for humans," she said sharply, sitting like a beggar in a hall of gold. Ethan stood slowly, his eyes meeting hers, not with anger but with quiet sadness. "I didn't ask for this," he said. "Your emperor demanded it. I only followed your laws." "You killed my champion," she hissed. "He chose the duel," Ethan replied softly. "I only fought to live." The words hit harder than she expected. Jera turned away, unwilling to let him see her doubt. Tali, her younger maid, whispered nervously, "Princess, he could have killed you in the arena too." "But he didn't." Jera snapped, "Silence!" Yet even her own voice trembled. Deep down she knew Tali was right. The human could have ended her life, but he didn't. Instead, he looked at her as if she mattered, even when she called him nothing. The guard stepped forward, placing a golden scroll on the table. The imperial sigil glowed brightly. "By order of His Majesty," one soldier said, "the human victor will receive the rights of ownership over the defeated house. The princess and her attendants are his by law." Ethan looked at the scroll, then at Jera. Her eyes were filled with fury and humiliation. Slowly he reached for his sword. The guards tensed, ready to strike, but instead of attacking, Ethan raised the blade and cut the silver cords binding her wrists. The sound of snapping metal echoed like thunder. Jera stared at him, speechless. Ethan placed the sword back on the table and said quietly, "You're free." The guards looked confused. One stepped forward. "That is against the decree. You cannot release what is yours." Ethan turned toward them and said in a steady voice, "Then tell your emperor that the human refuses to own anyone." The guard hesitated. Even he could feel something different about this man. Jera rubbed her wrists, still unable to believe what she saw. "Why would you do this?" she asked softly. "Because no one should belong to another," Ethan said. "Not even by your ancient laws." For a long moment silence filled the room. Jera's heart beat faster. She wanted to stay angry, to hate him, but his words felt heavier than any blade. Her pride screamed that this was weakness, but her soul whispered that it was strength. Tali and Vera bowed slightly to Ethan, their eyes full of quiet respect. "You have our gratitude, human," Vera said softly. Ethan shook his head. "Keep your gratitude. I just did what was right." Jera clenched her fists, torn between pride and something she didn't understand. "Do not think this act changes anything," she said coldly. "You may have won, but I will never be yours." Ethan's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "I never wanted you to be," he replied, turning away. The guards led Jera and her maids back toward their chambers. The hallway felt longer now, filled with unspoken questions. Jera's steps slowed. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to believe. That night, she stood by her window staring at the stars. Below, she saw Ethan in the courtyard, training alone under the moonlight. Every movement of his sword was graceful, silent, and calm. He was not celebrating his victory. He was practicing, as if preparing for another battle that only he could see. Her maids whispered behind her. "Maybe humans are not like we thought," Tali said. "Maybe this one is different," Vera added. Jera didn't answer. She only watched the human below, the strange man who freed her even when the law gave him power. For the first time, her hatred began to fade, replaced by a dangerous curiosity. She whispered softly to herself, "Who are you really, Ethan Ward?" But deep down she already knew. This human was going to change everything. Dark clouds gathered above the palace that night, covering the moons of Valora in thick shadows. The wind howled softly through the marble corridors, carrying whispers of fear. The Empire was restless. A human had defeated their champion, broken their laws, and freed the princess from her own chains. To the nobles it was humiliation. To the warriors it was an insult that could not be forgiven. Ethan Ward sat alone in a small guest chamber guarded by alien soldiers. He cleaned his blade slowly, his movements calm and precise. The metal glimmered faintly in the dim light. He knew what the silence meant. He had seen it before, right before a storm of blood. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, voices plotted in secret. He could almost feel their hatred pressing against him like smoke. Down the hall, Princess Jera Valora tossed restlessly in her bed. Sleep refused to come. The words of the human echoed in her head. No one should belong to another. She hated how they made her feel. His mercy had wounded her pride more deeply than his sword ever could. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't erase the image of him cutting her chains. Suddenly, a sound broke the night. A faint clang of metal, sharp and distant. Jera's eyes opened wide. She sat up listening. Then came another sound, closer this time, followed by the low hum of alien energy blades being drawn. Her heart raced. Something was wrong, Tali. Vera, she whispered urgently. Her two maids awoke instantly. Do you hear that? Before they could answer, a bright red flash lit up the hallway through the window. A scream followed, a guard's voice cut short. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Assassins! Vera gasped. The doors burst open. Two masked figures in black armor charged in. Jera froze, but before the first assassin could reach her, a sudden blur cut across the room. A silver streak flashed through the air, a sword strike so fast the assassins didn't even scream. Their bodies fell silently, split cleanly in half. Jera turned toward the doorway and saw him, Ethan Ward, his chest bandaged, sword glowing faintly in the dim light. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with focus. Stay behind me, he said firmly, without hesitation. More assassins stormed in, energy bolts flying. Ethan moved like wind. Each shot that came near Jera was deflected by his blade. The sound of steel meeting energy filled the chamber. One assassin leapt toward him, but Ethan sidestepped, grabbed the attacker's wrist, and turned his own blade against him. The man fell instantly. Why are they here? Tali cried. Ethan didn't look back. They're not here for me, he said. They're here for her. Jera's breath caught. Her father, the Emperor, must have sent them. The realization struck like lightning. He wanted to erase the shame by erasing her. A loud explosion rocked the palace. Flames spread through the hallway, turning gold walls red. Ethan grabbed Jera's hand. We need to move, he said. They ran through the smoke-filled corridor, the two maids close behind. Guards fought assassins at every corner. Ethan led them through side passages, his instincts guiding them like a soldier born for war. But near the courtyard, they were cornered by 5 armed killers. Jera froze as energy blades pointed toward them. Ethan pushed her behind him. His sword trembled slightly in his grip, not from fear, but exhaustion. He was still wounded from the duel, but he didn't care. The assassins attacked all at once, their blades glowing red. Ethan moved faster than their eyes could follow. One strike, one spin, one leap. Every movement perfect, every blow precise. When it ended, only he remained standing, breathing hard, surrounded by fallen enemies. Jera stepped forward, staring at him in disbelief. You're bleeding, she whispered. A deep cut ran along his side. It's nothing, Ethan said softly, wiping his blade. But as he turned, he staggered slightly. Jera caught him before he fell. The warmth of his blood spread on her hands. She looked down at it, bright human red, and something inside her broke. Tali whispered, He saved you, princess. He didn't have to. Jera didn't answer. Her throat tightened. She pressed her hand over his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Stay still, she said quietly. You've done enough. Ethan's voice was weak now. I couldn't let them take you, he said, barely audible. Why? She asked. You're not one of us. You don't owe me anything. His lips curved into a faint smile. Because strength means nothing if you use it to hurt. Then his eyes closed and he collapsed in her arms. Jera knelt on the cold floor, holding him close as fire burned around them. For the first time she felt fear, not for herself but for the strange human who fought for her life. She looked down at him and whispered, Don't you dare die, Ethan Ward. Outside, the flames reached the palace towers, painting the night sky in red, and deep within her heart, something she had never known before began to rise. A feeling stronger than pride, deeper than hate. The night that began with fire had changed her forever. The dawn came slow and heavy over the Valoran capital, its red light spilling across the burned palace grounds. Smoke still rose from the ruins, and the scent of ash lingered in the air. What had once been a night of silence turned into a storm of whispers and fear. Princess Jera Valora sat beside Ethan Ward, who still lay unconscious on a silken bed inside her private chamber. His wound had been cleaned and wrapped again by her own hands. The maids, Tali and Vera, moved quietly, whispering about the chaos outside. Soldiers were everywhere. The Emperor was furious. Assassins had failed, and rumors spread that the princess had sided with a human against her own people. Jera brushed a strand of hair from Ethan's face. His breathing was steady now. She didn't understand why she cared so much. Hours ago, she had wished him gone. Now she prayed he would wake. Every beat of his heart seemed to echo in her chest. Suddenly, the door burst open. Imperial guards marched in, their armor black and polished. Behind them stood a tall man in crimson robes, the Emperor of Valora, her father. His golden eyes glowed like burning suns, cold and merciless. "Leave us," he said to the guards. They bowed and stepped back. The Emperor's gaze fell upon Ethan and then on his daughter. "So," he began, his voice low and sharp, "the human still lives." Jera rose to her feet, bowing slightly. "Father, he saved me. Without him, I'd be dead." "The assassins, I sent them," the Emperor interrupted, his tone calm, almost gentle, but his words struck like lightning. "They were to end this disgrace quietly. You were to die a martyr, not live as a human servant." Jera froze. You tried to have me killed?" "You forced my hand," he said coldly. "The Empire cannot be ruled by a daughter bound to a lesser creature. His victory humiliated us before the stars. Our enemies are watching. Our allies are mocking us. Order must be restored." She took a step forward, anger burning through her fear. "He is not a lesser creature. He fought with honor, with strength none of your warriors could match. He spared me. He spared your throne." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "You speak with emotion, not wisdom. Perhaps the human's poison has reached your heart." Jera clenched her fists. "If caring for someone who saved me is poison, then yes, I'm infected." The Emperor's expression hardened. "Then you will do what must be done to cleanse it. The Council demands that the human accept his right, publicly and completely. He will claim you and your attendants as his concubines by law, sealing the bond before all. If he refuses, he dies by imperial execution at sunset." Jera's heart dropped. "You can't." "I can," the Emperor said. "He cannot walk free after defeating our champion and denying the law. The galaxy will see us as weak. Either he claims you or I erase him." Jera looked at Ethan's pale face. Her throat tightened. He had risked everything to protect her, and now the law that should have ended was being used to destroy him. That evening, the throne hall filled with nobles and soldiers. The air was heavy with tension and expectation. Golden banners waved above the marble floor, and torches burned bright along the walls. Ethan, still weak but standing tall, walked into the center. Chains of honor, not restraint, hung loosely from his wrists, marking him as the victor. The Emperor stood before the crowd, his voice echoing across the hall. "By our ancient law, this human holds victory over House Valora. The bond must be fulfilled. Step forward, Ethan Ward, and claim your right." Ethan looked up at Jera, who stood beside her maids, dressed in ceremonial white. Her eyes shimmered with defiance and fear. "Don't do it," she whispered. "I won't let you be part of this lie." Ethan took a deep breath. His wound still burned, but his spirit was stronger than ever. "I didn't fight to own anyone," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If your empire needs slavery to survive, then it deserves to fall." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nobles shouted in rage. The Emperor's jaw tightened. "Then you choose death," he said quietly. But before the guards could move, Jera stepped forward. Her voice rang clear. "No, he chooses honor, and I choose him." The hall fell silent. The Emperor's eyes widened slightly. "You defy your blood?" "I defy your cruelty," Jera said boldly. "You call him lesser, yet he fought for me when you tried to end my life. If he dies, so do I." Whispers turned to shouts. The nobles couldn't believe what they were hearing. The Emperor raised his hand to command silence, but it was too late. The people had heard her. The law was unbreakable. Her declaration bound her to the human by will, not force. Ethan stared at her, stunned. She met his gaze with fire in her eyes. "If this is how it must be," she whispered, "then let the galaxy see what we truly are." The Emperor turned away, his fury hidden behind a calm mask. "So be it," he said coldly. "You've written your fate." As the guards led them away to prepare the ritual, Sarah walked beside Ethan, her hand brushing his. Neither spoke, but both knew the truth. This was no longer about law or victory, it was about freedom, and the price of standing together against an empire built on pride. The grand hall was silent, the kind of silence that comes before history changes. Torches burned along the golden walls, their flames flickering like nervous hearts. At the center of the room stood Ethan Ward, dressed in a plain black uniform. No crown, no armor, just a soldier standing before an empire. Across from him stood Princess Jera Valora, wrapped in ceremonial white silk that shimmered like moonlight. Her two maids, Tali and Vera, stood behind her, trembling, their faces pale. The Emperor's voice echoed through the hall, steady but cold. "By the right of binding, the victor claims his conquered. By law, the defeated surrender their will, their blood, and their name. Begin the ceremony." A priest stepped forward carrying an ancient silver cup filled with glowing blue liquid, the essence of servitude, a binding potion that would mark the victor's ownership. He raised it high. "She drinks first, then her maids, then the victor seals the bond," the priest announced. Jera looked at the cup, her throat tightening. Every part of her wanted to scream, to run, but she knew there was no escape. She looked at Ethan, expecting to see pride or arrogance. Instead, his eyes were calm, steady, human, filled with something that didn't belong in this place. Compassion. The priest approached her. "Princess, kneel," he said. Jera took a deep breath. But before she could lower herself, Ethan spoke, his voice clear and firm. "No." Every head in the hall turned toward him. The Emperor's golden eyes narrowed. "You dare interrupt sacred law?" Ethan stepped forward, unarmed but unshaken. "Your law says the defeated must kneel, but it doesn't say the victor must stand above them." He took the cup from the priest's hands. The guards shifted, unsure whether to stop him. "If this ritual must happen," Ethan continued, "then it will happen on equal ground." Without waiting for permission, he raised the cup and drank first. Gasps filled the room. The priest stumbled back. "He can't. The essence binds the soul of the servant. He'll share their fate." The blue light spread from the cup into Ethan's veins, glowing beneath his skin like fire. He winced but did not falter. Then he handed the cup to Jera. "Now," he said softly, "you're not alone." Jera stared at him, her lips parted in shock. This human had just shared the binding meant to enslave her. By ancient law, the ritual could no longer make her his property. It made them equals. The spell could not recognize ownership between shared blood. The Emperor's face darkened, his voice thundering through the chamber. "You mock our traditions, human." Ethan turned to him. "I honor them," he said. "I just refuse to twist them into chains." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jera stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Father, your law said the victor must claim what is rightfully his. He did. He claimed our equality." The nobles gasped again. The hall began to stir with whispers. Some were shocked, others inspired. They had seen something new, a human standing before power, unbowed, unbroken, unafraid. The Emperor struck his staff to the floor. "This farce ends now," he roared. "Guards, arrest him." Dozens of soldiers rushed forward, energy blades igniting with sharp hums. Jera's heart pounded. But before the first soldier could strike, the blue light from the cup flared across the room, forming a bright circle of flame around Ethan and Jera. The essence of the ritual, twisted by Ethan's choice, created a living bond. The guards couldn't cross it. The crowd gasped as blue fire filled the air, crackling and humming with power. Jera could feel it in her chest, a connection to him, to his heartbeat, to his soul. "What did you do?" she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly, though his strength was fading. "Change the meaning," he said. "If they want a bond of blood, they'll get one, built on freedom, not fear." The Emperor shouted in rage, but even he could not break the old magic. The fire burned too brightly, ancient and alive. When it finally faded, both Ethan and Jera stood unharmed, their wrists glowing faintly with the same mark, a circle of light shaped like two crossing swords. The priest fell to his knees. "The old law has spoken," he whispered. They are bound as equals. Jera looked at Ethan, her chest heavy with emotion. You could have been king, she said softly. Instead, you chose to share my burden. Ethan shook his head. I didn't want to be king, he said quietly. I just wanted to be human. The crowd remained silent, watching as the impossible unfolded before them. A human rewriting the oldest law of the Valoran Empire with one simple act of courage. Jera reached out and took his hand, the glow on her wrist pulsing gently. Then let us be human together, she whispered. Outside, the bells of the capital began to ring, not in mourning but in awakening. Something had changed forever in the heart of the empire. The bond that was meant to enslave had become a symbol of unity. And though both knew the emperor's fury would soon fall upon them, they also knew something greater had begun, something that even fire and blood could not break. That night, for the first time, Jera didn't feel like a prisoner. She felt alive. The empire did not sleep that night. Across the shining cities of Valora, whispers spread faster than light. The story of the human who drank the binding potion first, who turned the law of ownership into a law of equality, was on every tongue. Some called him a fool, others a hero, but one truth echoed through the empire's heart. The age of silence was ending. Inside the royal fortress, Ethan Ward stood on a high balcony beside Princess Jera Valora. The twin moons hung above them, pale and distant. Below, the torches of unrest flickered. Crowds gathering, soldiers whispering, nobles watching. They're afraid, Ethan said quietly, his gaze fixed on the city below. They should be, Jera replied. For the first time, they've seen what real courage looks like. Her tone carried pride, but her eyes carried worry. She could feel the storm forming behind palace walls. Her father's fury was not just anger, it was power, sharp and ancient. The emperor would not let his daughter or a human rewrite the foundations of his rule. Ethan turned toward her, his face calm but weary. He'll come for us, he said. Not just to punish us, but to erase what we represent. Jera nodded. The council already met in secret this morning. They called your act heresy. They say you've infected me with human weakness. He gave a faint smile. Funny thing about weakness, it's usually just strength someone doesn't understand. Tali and Vera stepped onto the balcony, their faces pale. Princess, Vera said softly, the Imperial Guard is moving. They've surrounded the outer walls. And we overheard something. The Emperor has given the order. Ethan is to be executed at dawn. Jera's breath caught. No, she whispered. Ethan didn't look surprised. I told you this would happen, he said quietly. He can't allow me to live. The people have seen too much. If I live, the idea of freedom lives with me. Jera turned to him sharply. Then we won't let him kill it. He looked at her, puzzled. You'd defy your empire for me? She met his gaze, her voice trembling but fierce. Not for you, for what you showed me. My people think they are strong, but they live in chains made of pride. You showed me there's another way. Before he could answer, the sound of heavy boots echoed from the corridor. Guards were approaching. Tali gasped, They're here! Ethan's hand went instinctively to his sword, though he knew it wouldn't be enough against an army. Jera grabbed his arm. Follow me, she said. She led him through a hidden passage behind the balcony, narrow and dark, carved from the palace's old foundations. My mother once used this tunnel to escape assassins, she whispered. It leads to the old citadel. They moved quickly, the maids close behind. The walls were cold and the air smelled of dust and time. Above them, the palace shook as soldiers stormed room after room. When they reached the end of the tunnel, they stepped into the night. The citadel stood ahead, a broken tower from a forgotten war. Ethan looked back toward the palace. Flames were already spreading along its upper levels. He's burning his own home, Ethan murmured. To erase the shame, Jera said bitterly. He would rather see it all in ashes than accept change. As they moved through the ruins, shouts echoed in the distance. The Emperor's soldiers were closing in. Ethan turned to face Jera. Go without me. If they catch you with me, you'll die too. Jera's eyes blazed. Don't ask me to run from the man who saved my life. I won't leave you again. He hesitated, but she was already stepping forward, drawing a fallen soldier's blade from the ground. Then we fight together, she said. When the soldiers reached them, the battle exploded like thunder. Energy bolts tore through the air. Ethan moved fast, deflecting each strike with precise motions. Zara fought beside him, not as a princess but as a warrior reborn. Her maids threw makeshift bombs from their belts, scattering fire and smoke. But there were too many. The soldiers surrounded them, tightening their circle. Ethan's breath came hard. Zara's blade trembled in her hand. Then a deep voice cut through the chaos. Enough! The Emperor himself stepped through the flames, his armor shining gold and red, his eyes glowing with wrath. You defied me, he said, his tone like ice. You poisoned my daughter with human weakness. Ethan raised his sword, but the Emperor simply raised a hand. A wave of energy blasted outward, throwing Ethan to the ground. He groaned, trying to rise, but his limbs refused to move. Zara screamed, "Stop! He's not your enemy!" The Emperor looked at her coldly. You are no longer my daughter, he said. Tears burned her eyes. Then I'll make my own destiny, she whispered. She knelt beside Ethan, pressing her hand against his chest. The faint blue glow of their shared mark began to pulse again. Energy crackled between them, stronger than before. The Emperor stepped back in shock as the glow spread across the battlefield, pushing soldiers away. Ethan's eyes opened, light reflecting in them. Zara, he said softly, what are you doing? Finishing what you started, she whispered. The bond flared, fire and light twisting together, surrounding them in a storm of blue flame. The soldiers fell back blinded. The Emperor shielded his face as the ground shook. When the light faded, the citadel stood empty. Ethan and Zara were gone. Only their twin marks remained, glowing faintly on the stone floor, a promise that the Empire would never be the same again. The Empire searched for them for 7 long days, yet they were nowhere to be found. Some said the human and the princess had been burned to ash by the Emperor's wrath. Others whispered that they had fled beyond the outer moons. But deep within the ruins of the old citadel, beneath layers of stone and forgotten history, Ethan Ward and Princess Zara Valora lived, hidden from the Empire that hunted them. The air inside the ancient chamber was cool and silent. Flickering blue crystals lit the walls with a soft, living glow. Ethan sat near a broken pillar, his body weak but healing. Beside him knelt Zara, cleaning the wound on his shoulder with gentle hands. You're quiet, she said softly. He smiled faintly. I'm thinking. About what? About how strange it feels, he said, glancing up at her. To be hunted by an empire and still feel free. Zara smiled for the first time in days. Freedom always has a price, she said. You just paid it willingly. For a while they said nothing. The silence between them was warm, filled with unspoken understanding. The glowing mark on their wrists, 2 crossing swords bound by a circle of light, still shimmered faintly. It was more than a symbol now. It was proof that the old laws could change. Above ground, however, the Empire was breaking. Protests filled the cities. Warriors who once knelt in silence now questioned the Emperor's will. Commoners spoke of the human who bled for honor, the princess who defied bloodlines, and the bond that glowed brighter than chains. The story spread like wildfire through the stars, and what began as rumor became rebellion. On the morning of the 8th day, Vera rushed into the chamber, breathless. Princess, Ethan! The outer gates are burning. The Emperor's army marches toward the citadel. Ethan rose slowly, pain flashing in his eyes, but his voice was steady. Then it's time to end this. Zara's hand shot out. You can't fight him alone again, she said. Ethan smiled softly. I won't have to. When they stepped out of the ruins, they saw thousands of torches in the distance, soldiers of the Empire advancing like a river of fire. But something unexpected happened. From the opposite hills, other torches appeared, smaller, rougher, carried by citizens, farmers, and deserters from the Imperial ranks. They came not to fight Ethan, but to stand beside him. Zara's eyes widened. They're here for you. No, Ethan said quietly. They're here for themselves. The 2 armies met in the valley under the crimson dawn. The Emperor's voice thundered across the field, amplified by ancient technology. Surrender the traitor and my daughter, and I will spare the rest. Zara stepped forward, her voice strong. No, father. You don't understand. You can't kill what's already in their hearts. You can destroy me, but you can't destroy what I've seen. The Emperor's gaze burned with fury. You've shamed your bloodline. You stand beside a creature unworthy of our stars. Ethan stepped forward, sword in hand, his tone calm and clear. Maybe, he said. But that unworthy creature saved your daughter, your empire, and your law from becoming monsters. A murmur rippled through both sides. The Emperor's hand trembled with rage. Then face your punishment, human. Energy crackled around him as he raised his staff, releasing a storm of light. The blast struck the ground like thunder. But before it could reach them, Ethan stepped in front of Zera. The blue mark on his wrist flared, forming a shield of fire that split the Emperor's energy apart. The shockwave knocked soldiers to the ground. The people gasped as Ethan stood, the mark burning bright, the light reflecting in his eyes. "I'm not your enemy," he said, his voice echoing across the valley. "But if you want peace through power, then power is all you'll ever lose." The Emperor's staff cracked in his hand. The energy backlash sent him falling to his knees. Around him, his army hesitated, uncertain, their loyalty breaking like glass. Jera walked toward him, her voice trembling. "You taught me strength meant control, but he showed me strength means compassion. You ruled by fear, Father. It's time the Empire learned to live without it." She knelt beside him, not as a daughter begging forgiveness, but as a leader ending an era. The Emperor looked at her, tears of fury and defeat in his eyes. "You would trade power for peace." "I'd trade a throne for truth," she said softly. He bowed his head, his golden eyes dimming. "Then you are more Valoran than I ever was." The war ended without another blade drawn. The Empire changed that day, not by conquest but by courage. Months later, the laws of the Valoran Empire were rewritten. The right of conquest was abolished. No being could claim ownership over another. The bond of fire and blood was engraved into the Empire's new seal, 2 crossing swords bound in light. And on a quiet morning, far from the capital, Ethan and Zera stood together on a hillside watching the sunrise. The sky glowed gold and red. Zera turned to him with a smile. "You came here as a stranger," she said softly. "Now you've changed a world." Ethan smiled back. "I didn't change it," he said. "You did. I just reminded them what being human means." She looked up at the rising sun. "Then maybe it's time we start teaching the stars too." Their hands intertwined, the light from their bond glowing once more, a promise to a galaxy reborn. The man who split a champion had done more than win a duel. He had split an empire's chains, and together they built something far greater than victory. They built peace.